Greetings. Good evening. Okay, so it is Tuesday, and as it is Tuesday, we are going to do Tuesday Tales of Terror, where am reading uh, Edgar Allan Poe's collection of works. And these are 30-minute windows, and we're just going to read what we can in the time of those 30-minute windows. Um, and if we don't finish a story, we'll pick it up next week. If we finish a story early, then we will fill it in with some of his prose, his poetry, because the man was a wordsmith. He's so eloquent in the way that he expresses himself, and the things that go through his mind are absolutely terrifying, and this is why he's a classic. This is why he speaks to our hearts. Regardless, Gomunkwe. We tonight, this evening, I feel a tad scattered, and I do apologize for the chaotic energy. This is just who I am. Tonight we're reading one of the old classics, The Telltale Heart. This is one of the first stories that I ever read by him. If you remember from last week, my mom bought me a collection of Edgar Allan Poe's novels. I think there was about, or novellas, there was about 5 to 7 stories in it. It was one of the first books that I ever owned. So this is The Telltale Heart. Do I look like a real person to you? Because I'm not. Anyway, The Telltale Heart. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him, and every night about midnight I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just at midnight, but I found the eye was always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he passed the night. So you see he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily, steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Let me let Pepper in. Come on. Let us return. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo. You can wait. I'm sorry. You can wait. You can wait. You're not starving. With its dreadful echo, the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. Or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he's been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open. Wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done, but for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart, and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. Cut off the head, the arms, and the legs. Casual. Then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber, and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught it all. Ha ha! When I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock. Still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room, and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale, and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat, and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued, and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued, and gained definiteness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Oh, God! What could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore! I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again! Hark! Louder! 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 Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It is the beating of his hideous heart. That was one of the first stories I ever read by him. I think I was 8. Anyway, here we have the theme, once again, of the murderer being so distraught by his murder that he accidentally turns himself in his own confidence. So we will cross off the telltale heart. Scrape my pencil. Little check marks. And now let us read some of the prose, some of his poetry, poems. We have quite some time left, so we can read some of the longer ones tonight. And I know that poetry is not everyone's favorite. So if you're leaving now, farewell. Have a lovely evening. I hope you sleep like the dead. Okay, let's read Tamerlane. Let's cross off to Margaret and to Octavia. Let's cross off Tamerlane. And I believe we read Dreams last week as well. No, we didn't. We talked about it. We read Song. All right. Tamerlane. Kind solace in a dying hour. Such, Father, is not now my theme. I will not madly deem that power of earth may shrive me of the sin unearthly pride hath revelled in. I have no time to dote or dream. You call it hope, that fire of fire. It is but agony of desire. If I can hope, God, I can. Its fount is holier, more divine. I would not call thee fool, old man, but such is not a gift of thine. Know thou the secret of a spirit bowed from its wild pride into shame? O yearning heart, I did inherit thy withering portion with the fame, the searing glory which hath shone amid the jewels of my throne, halo of hell, and with a pain not hell shall make me fear again. O craving heart for the lost flowers and sunshine of my summer hours, the undying voice of that dead time with its interminable chime rings in the spirit of a spell upon thy emptiness, a knell. I have not always been as now the fevered diadem on my brow I claimed and won usurpingly. Hath not the same fierce heirdom given Rome to the Caesar, this to me? The heritage of a kingly mind and a proud spirit which hath striven triumphantly with humankind. On mountain soil I first drew life. The mists of the Taglay have shed nightly their dews upon my head, and I believe the winged strife and tumult of the headlong air have nestled in my very hair. So late from heaven that dew it fell mid dreams of an unholy night, upon me with the touch of hell, with the red flashing of the light. From clouds that hung like banners o'er appeared to my half-closing eye the pageantry of monarchy, and the deep trumpet thunder's roar came hurriedly upon me, telling of human battle, where my voice, my own voice, silly child, was swelling. Oh, how my spirit would rejoice and leap within me at the cry, the battle cry of victory. The rain came down upon my head unsheltered, and the heavy wind rendered me mad and deaf and blind. It was but men, I thought, who shed laurels upon me, and the torrent of the chilly air, gurgled within my ear the crush of empires with the captive's prayer, the hum of suitors and the tone of flattery round a sovereign's throne. My passions from that hapless hour usurped a tyranny which men have deemed since I have reached a power. My innate nature, be it so. But, Father, there lived one who then in my boyhood, when their fire burned with a still intenser glow, for passion must with youth expire. Even then, who knew this iron heart in woman's weakness had a part? I have no words, alas, to tell the loveliness of loving well, nor would I now attempt to trace the more than beauty of a face, whose lineaments upon my mind are shadows on the unstable wind. Thus I remember having dwelt some page of early lore upon, with loitering eye, till I have felt the letters with their meaning melt to fantasies with none. Oh, she was worthy of all love. Love as in infancy was mine. 'Twas such an angel minds above might envy, her young heart the shrine on which my every hope and thought were incense, then a goodly gift, for they were childish and upright, pure as her young example taught. Why did I leave it, and adrift trust the fire within for light? We grew in age and love together, roaming the forest and the wild, my breast her shield in wintry weather, and when the friendly sunshine smiled, and she would mark the opening skies, I saw no heaven but in her eyes. Young love's first lesson is the heart. For mid that sunshine and those smiles, when from our little cares apart, and laughing at her girlish wiles, I'd thrown me on her throbbing breast, and pour my spirit out in tears, there was no need to speak the rest, no need to quiet any fears of her who'd ask no reason why, but turned on me her quiet eye. Yet more than worthy of the love my spirit struggled with and strove, when on the mountain peak alone ambition lent it a new tone. I had no being but in thee, the world and all it did contain, in the earth, the air, the sea, its joy, its little lot of pain, that was new pleasure, the ideal. Dim vanities of dreams by night, and dimmer nothings which were real, shadows in a more shadowy light, parted upon their misty wings, and so confusedly became thine image and a name, two separate yet most intimate things. I was ambitious, have you known? The passion, Father, you have not. A cottager, I marked a throne of half the world as all my own, and murmured at such lowly lot. But just like any other dream upon the vapor of the dew, my own had passed, did not the beam of beauty, which did while it through, the minute, the hour, the day, oppress my mind with double loveliness. We'd walked together on the crown of a high mountain which looked down afar from its proud natural towers of rock and forest on the hills, the dwindled hills, begirt with bowers and shouting with 1,000 rills. I spoke to her of power and pride, but mystically in such guise that she might deem it naught beside the moment's converse. In her eyes I read, perhaps too carelessly, a mingled feeling with my own. The flush on her bright cheek to me seemed to become a queenly throne, too well that I should let it be light in the wilderness alone. I wrapped myself in grandeur then, and donned a visionary crown, yet it was not that fantasy had thrown her mantle over me, but that among the rabble, men, lion's ambition is chained down, and crouches to a keeper's hand. Not so in deserts where the grand, the wild, the terrible conspire with their own breath to fan his fire. Look round thee now on Samarcand. Is she not queen of earth? Her pride, above all cities, in her hand, their destinies and all beside, of glory which the world hath known, stands she not nobly and all alone? Falling, her veriest stepping stone shall form the pedestal of a throne, and who her sovereign? Timur, he whom the astonished people saw striding o'er empires haughtily, a diademed outlaw. O human love, thou spirit given on earth of all we hope in heaven, which falls into the soul like rain upon the siroc withered plain, and failing in thy power to bless, but leaves the heart a wilderness. Idea, which bindest life around with music of so strange a sound, and beauty of so wild a birth, farewell, for I have won the earth. When hope, the eagle that towered, could see no cliff beyond him in the sky, his pinions were bent droopingly, and homeward turned his softened eye. 'Twas sunset, when the sun will part, there comes a sullenness of heart to him who still would look upon the glory of the summer sun. That soul will hate the evening mist, so often lovely, and will list to the sound of the coming darkness, known to those whose spirits hearken as one who in a dream of night would fly, but cannot from a danger nigh. What though the moon, the white moon, shed all the splendor of her noon? Her smile is chilly, and her beam in that time of dreariness will seem so like you gather in your breath a portrait taken after death. And boyhood is a summer sun, whose waning is the dreariest one, for all we live to know is known, and all we seek to keep hath flown. Let life then as the dayflower fall, with the noonday beauty which is all. I reached my home no more, for all had flown who made it so. I passed from out its mossy door, and though my tread was soft and low, a voice came from the threshold stone of one whom I had earlier known. Oh, I defy thee, hell, to show on beds of fire that burn below a humbler heart, a deeper woe. Father, I firmly do believe, I know, for death who comes for me, from regions of the blest afar, where there is nothing to deceive, hath left his iron gate ajar, and rays of truth you cannot see are flashing through eternity. I do believe that Eblis hath a snare in every human path. Else how, when in the holy grove I wandered of the idol, love, who daily scents his snowing wings with incense of burnt offerings from the most unpolluted things, whose pleasant bowers are yet so riven above with trellicked rays from heaven, no mote may shun, no tiniest fly, the lightning of his eagle eye. How was it that ambition crept unseen amid the revels there, till growing bold he laughed and leapt in the tangles of love's very hair? Okay, I'm going to be honest. That was a little bit of a difficult one. So, kudos to you if you stuck it out with me through that one. I promise some of his poems are much better than others. I mean, that's with any poet or author. There are some that I quote pretty regularly, and we'll get to them eventually. However, this evening we have come to our conclusion. So, tonight we read The Telltale Heart and Tamerlane, which honestly I don't think I've ever read Tamerlane, so we're just kind of going in order. Thank you so much for joining, and we will pick this up next week for our third installment of Tuesday Tales of Terror. So it'll be 10 to 10:30 Pacific time. Well, my darlings, I do love you. I hope that this is fun for you. It's fun for me. I like practicing saying words that I don't recognize and murdering them. All right. Have a great evening. Thank you for joining. And as always, the love, the light, the murder in me sees and honors the love, the light, and the murderer in you. Have a great night, y'all. Bye.